Choose clarity before comfort. This journey does not begin with armies or maps. It begins with the invisible battlefield you already inhabit. Every day you face pressure without uniforms, uncertainty without warning, and emotional storms without a command structure. You try to control outcomes, people, and futures that refuse to obey. The result is exhaustion disguised as responsibility and anxiety mistaken for awareness. This video is built as a mirror, not a lecture. It will not tell you how to conquer the world. It will show you how human beings once learned to remain stable when the world collapsed around them. What you are about to hear is not history used as decoration. It is history used as instruction for the inner life. The promise is not relief through escape, but strength through perception. If you stay with this path, you will recognize something unsettling and liberating at once. The same forces that once tested leaders under fire are testing you now in quieter forms. The question is not whether pressure exists. The question is whether your mind will remain a place of panic or become a place of command. You do not need a battlefield to experience war. You experience it in the tension of ordinary mornings, when fear speaks before thought and urgency replaces judgment. You experience it when the future feels heavy and the present feels insufficient. The modern struggle does not arrive with uniforms or explosions. It arrives as emotional pressure, constant comparison, and the silent demand to control what cannot be controlled. This is the battlefield of the mind, and most people enter it without training, without strategy, and without command. In World War II, the first collapse was rarely physical, it was psychological. Men froze not because their bodies failed, but because their perception fractured under uncertainty. The enemy was invisible at first, and so was the danger. Panic did not come from bullets alone. It came from not knowing what would happen next. The same mechanism governs everyday life. Anxiety is born when the mind demands certainty from a world that does not offer it. Emotional overload appears when interpretation outruns reality. What feels like weakness is often misdirected vigilance. You have been taught that peace will come when circumstances finally obey you, when the job stabilizes, when people change, when the future becomes predictable. This belief creates exhaustion disguised as responsibility. It trains you to fight events instead of understand them. Leadership, however, begins with a different realization. The primary conflict is not between you and the world, but between impulse and discernment inside you. The mind that cannot distinguish between what depends on it and what does not becomes a battlefield without a commander. In wartime, those who survived psychologically learned a brutal lesson early. They could not command outcomes, they could only command posture. They could not guarantee safety, they could guarantee conduct. The soldier who tried to control the entire war collapsed under its weight. The soldier who learned to govern his reactions remained functional even when fear surrounded him. This was not heroism, it was mental order imposed on chaos. Your life repeats this pattern in quieter forms. Fear arrives before facts. Anger arrives before understanding. Worry arrives before necessity. Each emotion claims authority. Leadership is the refusal to grant that authority automatically. It is the decision to pause, to interpret, and to choose. Emotional slavery is not feeling too much. It is obeying feelings without examination. Inner command begins when you recognize that sensation is not instruction and thought is not destiny. You are already in a battle because every day presents the same test that faced human beings under fire. Will you react or will you respond? Will you demand control or will you exercise judgment? The world will remain unstable. That is not the crisis. The crisis is when the mind mirrors that instability. When perception becomes disorder, life becomes siege. This is where leadership truly starts, not in influence over others, but in coherence within yourself. Before armies moved, before strategies formed, before victories were imagined, something more essential had to occur. A human being had to decide not to be ruled by panic. That decision did not end the war, but it ended inner collapse. And until you see that your struggle is first psychological, every external challenge will feel like an enemy instead of a condition of life. Most people imagine war as noise, fire, and movement. They think of tanks, sirens, and collapsing cities. But for those who lived through World War II, the deepest struggle was not always outside. It was inside the mind, where uncertainty had no shape and fear had no schedule. Leadership did not emerge from physical force alone. It emerged from the ability to think clearly when meaning itself was under threat. When historians like Anthony Beevor describe soldiers waiting in silence before combat, they reveal something rarely discussed. The danger was not only what might happen, but what the mind imagined would happen. The body prepared for disaster long before disaster arrived. This psychological pressure forced a transformation. War became less about defeating an enemy and more about governing perception. Those who survived learned that explosions could not be controlled, but interpretation could. The battlefield exposed a truth that daily life often hides. Chaos is inevitable, but inner disorder is optional. This reframing changes what leadership means. It is no longer about commanding others through authority. It is about commanding oneself through clarity. In the midst of confusion, effective leaders were not those who eliminated fear, but those who refused to let fear distort judgment. They learned to separate what was happening from what they imagined might happen. This distinction preserved their capacity to act. Modern life produces a similar confusion. News, expectations, and emotional pressure arrive faster than reflection. You are told that urgency equals importance and that anxiety equals responsibility. This creates a false battlefield where everything feels like a crisis. By seeing war only as violence, you miss its deeper lesson. War is the ultimate environment of uncertainty. Leadership is the art of remaining intelligible to yourself within that uncertainty. In the accounts of Max Hastings, moments of collapse often came not from enemy action, but from internal breakdown. Units failed when fear replaced reasoning. They survived when discipline returned to the mind. This is not military instruction. It is psychological architecture. The same architecture governs everyday stress. When emotion defines reality, confusion rules. When reason defines meaning, stability returns. Reframing war as an inner command changes how you view your struggles. The argument at home, the pressure at work, the fear of the future, all resemble a smaller version of the same human test. Will perception be shaped by impulse or by understanding? Leadership appears when you no longer treat every emotional signal as a command. You learn to observe before obeying. You learn to interpret before reacting. This shift is quiet but decisive. War teaches that clarity is not born from control of events, but from order of mind. Explosions do not create leaders. Decisions under pressure do. And pressure today is psychological more than physical. The battlefield has moved inward. Once you stop seeing conflict as something that happens only outside you, a new responsibility emerges. You realize that the true arena of leadership is not history or politics or power. It is perception itself. And the next lesson reveals what happens when reality refuses to obey that perception and control proves to be an illusion. Every war begins with plans. Maps are drawn, timetables are set, confidence is rehearsed. Yet World War II exposed a brutal truth that no strategy could escape. Reality does not obey intention. Armies advanced into terrain they did not understand. Weather erased months of preparation. Communication failed at the moment it was needed most. What collapsed first was not always the front line, but the illusion of control. In the stories recorded by Richard Overy, one pattern appears again and again. Leaders who believed events would unfold according to design were the first to lose their footing. They treated uncertainty as an enemy instead of a condition. When reality contradicted their expectations, fear rushed in to fill the gap left by certainty. The shock was not in what happened, but in discovering that prediction had limits. This same shock governs ordinary life. You plan a future that assumes cooperation from people, stability from circumstances, and fairness from time. Then something interrupts. A loss, a betrayal, an illness, a sudden change. The mind reacts with protest rather than adaptation. It asks why instead of asking how. Emotional suffering deepens not because the event is unbearable, but because control was assumed and then denied. World War II forced human beings to confront this truth without escape. Soldiers could not negotiate with weather, chance, or mortality. The only territory they could govern was their own response. Those who tried to dominate the uncontrollable dissolved into panic. Those who accepted limits preserved coherence. This was not resignation. It was a disciplined recognition of boundaries. They learned that leadership begins where control ends. The dichotomy of control was not a philosophical idea in wartime. It was survival logic. There were actions that could be taken and outcomes that could not be guaranteed. The mind had to learn to stand between those two realities without collapsing. When this distinction failed, fear became authority. When it succeeded, clarity returned. Your daily struggles echo this same structure. You attempt to manage outcomes instead of conduct. You try to command reactions instead of judgments. When the world resists, you feel personally defeated. But the lesson of war is precise. The mind breaks not because reality is harsh, but because it demands mastery where only influence is possible. This is where transformation begins, not by expanding control, but by refining responsibility. You stop asking for certainty and start cultivating discernment. You replace expectation with preparation. You recognize that unpredictability is not an enemy. It is the environment in which leadership is tested. Once this shift occurs, something subtle changes. The future no longer feels like a threat. It becomes a field of choices rather than a storm of fear. You no longer waste strength fighting what cannot be moved. You apply it where it can shape meaning. And from this recognition emerges the next challenge, one even more intimate. Not the struggle with events, but the struggle between emotion and reason inside your own mind. In every crisis of World War II, two forces confronted each other long before armies did. One was emotion, immediate and powerful. The other was reason, slower but decisive. Fear demanded flight. Anger demanded action. Panic demanded certainty where none existed. Reason demanded pause. Between these two voices, leadership was born or lost. Accounts preserved by Anthony Beaver describe moments when soldiers felt terror rising before the first shot was fired. The body reacted faster than the situation itself. Heartbeats accelerated, thoughts narrowed, judgment weakened. Yet survival often depended on the opposite movement. Those who slowed their reactions regained clarity. Those who allowed fear to command their choices multiplied danger. War did not remove emotion. It revealed whether emotion would rule or be ruled. This same courtroom operates inside you each day. Emotion presents its case with urgency. It claims that feeling is fact and that discomfort is threat. Reason answers more quietly. It weighs evidence. It asks whether reaction is necessary or merely habitual. When emotion becomes judge and executioner, chaos follows. When reason resumes its role, order returns. Leadership is not the absence of feeling. It is the refusal to surrender authority to feeling. In wartime, a commander who acted only from fear endangered his men. A commander who acknowledged fear but acted from judgment preserved them. The lesson is precise. You cannot silence emotion, but you can refuse to let it command. Emotional energy can either distort perception or sharpen it, depending on who holds the reins. Modern life confuses urgency with importance. Notifications replace reflection. Stress becomes a signal to move faster instead of to think deeper. This trains the mind to obey the loudest impulse rather than the most accurate understanding. Over time, reaction becomes identity. People say they are anxious, angry, or overwhelmed, as if these states were destiny instead of processes. World War II teaches another model. In extreme conditions, clarity became a form of survival. Men learned to separate sensation from decision. They felt fear but did not worship it. They acknowledged uncertainty but did not collapse into it. This discipline was not emotional suppression, it was emotional integration. Feeling informed judgment instead of replacing it. Your own conflicts follow the same design. Arguments, failures, and disappointments awaken ancient instincts. The impulse is to strike, withdraw, or despair. Rational command is the choice to examine before acting. It is the moment when you stop being a battlefield and become a strategist. Inner leadership emerges when emotion is treated as data, not decree. This shift changes everything. Chaos loses its mystery. Fear becomes information. Anger becomes a signal. Anxiety becomes a question instead of a verdict. The mind no longer fractures under pressure. It organizes it, and once reason takes its place again, another transformation becomes possible. Not the conquest of pain, but the acceptance of fate without illusion, the strength that appears when resistance gives way to understanding. World War II confronted humanity with realities that could not be negotiated. Cities vanished, families disappeared, futures were erased overnight. No amount of courage could reverse loss once it arrived. Those who endured psychologically did not do so by denying suffering, but by learning to face it without illusion. Acceptance was not weakness. It was the only form of strength that did not depend on favorable outcomes. In the narratives preserved by Max Hastings, one discovers a quiet discipline among those who survived the longest. They did not waste energy asking why fate had chosen them. They asked only how they would conduct themselves within it. This shift did not remove pain, but it removed confusion. When death was possible at any hour, clarity became more valuable than hope. They learned that dignity was not found in controlling destiny, but in responding to it with coherence. Modern life hides this lesson behind comfort and distraction. You are taught that resistance is power and that refusal is courage. Yet the more you fight what cannot be changed, the more fragile you become. Emotional suffering increases when reality is treated as an adversary instead of a condition. Acceptance is not resignation. It is the clearing of mental fog. It is the moment when the mind stops arguing with existence and starts understanding its limits. The men and women of that era did not romanticize pain. They acknowledged it. They did not surrender responsibility. They refined it. When the future could not be secured, attention returned to the present. When control disappeared, conduct became central. This is the paradox of fate. The less you demand certainty from the world, the more stability you create within yourself. Your own struggles follow this same pattern. There are events you cannot prevent and people you cannot reform. There are outcomes you cannot foresee and losses you cannot undo. The instinct is to resist, to replay, to protest. But protest does not heal. It multiplies unrest. Acceptance transforms suffering into something intelligible. It replaces chaos with proportion. This does not mean passivity. It means precision. You stop confusing what must be endured with what can be shaped. You stop exhausting yourself, trying to dominate chance. You begin to cultivate character instead of outcomes. This is how fate becomes teacher rather than enemy. When acceptance takes root, something remarkable occurs. Fear loosens its grip. Anger loses its authority. The future stops appearing as a threat and begins to resemble a landscape of possible actions. You are no longer crushed by uncertainty because you are no longer arguing with it. And in that quiet clarity, leadership takes on a new meaning. Not the power to change everything, but the power to remain whole when not everything can be changed. The next step of this journey reveals where this strength is exercised. Not in history, not in armies, but in the invisible battlefield of daily decisions, where leadership no longer requires followers, only self-command. When people hear the word leadership, they imagine crowds, authority, and influence. They think of speeches, ranks, and recognition. World War II exposes a quieter truth. Leadership did not begin with commanding others. It began with the ability to remain coherent when circumstances dissolved. The most decisive battles were often fought inside a single mind before they were fought on any field. In the personal accounts gathered by Anthony Beaver, moments of leadership appear where no one is watching. A soldier steadies his breathing under fire. An officer restrains panic to give clear instructions. A nurse continues her duty despite exhaustion and grief. These acts did not change the war, but they changed the human being within it. They demonstrate that leadership is not defined by position, but by posture. Your daily life presents the same invisible battlefield. You wake to uncertainty. You face conflict without warning. You carry responsibilities without guarantees. No one may applaud these moments, but they demand the same inner discipline. Leadership is how you speak to yourself when fear rises. It is how you interpret failure. It is how you hold yourself when emotion demands surrender. The mistake is to believe leadership begins when others are present. In truth, it begins when no one is watching. It is forged in silence, in decisions that shape character rather than reputation. War stripped away ceremony and revealed essence. What remained was conduct. Not victory, but integrity under pressure. Modern life offers constant distraction from this inner task. External success is celebrated, inner stability is ignored. Yet without self-command, influence becomes noise and action becomes impulse. The battlefield of everyday life is psychological. Arguments, disappointments, and uncertainty test whether perception will fracture or organize. This is where the dichotomy of control becomes practical. You cannot govern outcomes, but you can govern interpretation. You cannot eliminate stress, but you can decide what it means. Leadership is the art of translating chaos into action without letting chaos define identity. Once this understanding takes root, the idea of power changes. Power is no longer domination. It is alignment. You act without being dragged by emotion. You choose without being blinded by fear. You remain responsible without being crushed by fate. This is leadership without followers and authority without force. From this perspective, everyday life becomes a training ground. Each decision is a rehearsal. Each emotional storm is a test. You do not wait for great events to become a leader. You practice leadership in small moments of clarity. And as this inner command strengthens, a transformation begins that cannot be seen from the outside, but reshapes everything on the inside. Chaos no longer feels like threat. It becomes material for growth. The next movement of this journey reveals what happens when this discipline matures, when emotional turbulence gives way to a quieter form of strength, and the mind experiences a shift that feels less like victory and more like balance. Transformation is often imagined as a sudden event, a moment of triumph or revelation. World War II suggests something very different. Change did not arrive with celebration. It arrived with adjustment. Men and women did not become stronger by eliminating fear, but by reorganizing their relationship with it. What once overwhelmed them became something they could carry. In the testimonies preserved by Richard Overy, endurance is described not as bravery, but as orientation. People learned where to place their attention. They learned what deserved energy and what deserved acceptance. This shift did not announce itself loudly. It appeared as steadiness in movement, calm in voice, and restraint in judgment. The inner storm did not disappear. It lost its authority. This same quiet transformation unfolds in ordinary life when perception changes. Chaos becomes structure. Fear becomes information rather than command. Fate becomes neutral rather than hostile. Emotions stop behaving like masters and begin functioning as signals. You are no longer at war with your own reactions. You are in dialogue with them. The mind that once demanded certainty now accepts probability. The heart that once sought control now practices responsibility. This does not remove difficulty. It removes distortion. Suffering becomes proportionate instead of endless. You stop adding fear to uncertainty and anger to limitation. The world does not soften, but your stance within it does. This shift is not motivational. It is structural. You begin to see events as they are rather than as threats to identity. Loss is still loss, but it is no longer personal defeat. Pressure is still pressure, but it is no longer chaos. You become capable of acting without panic and accepting without collapse. In wartime, this transformation preserved human dignity. In everyday life, it preserves sanity. The same mechanism applies. When the mind organizes experience instead of fighting it, stability replaces exhaustion. You do not escape difficulty. You move through it with coherence. This is the moment when leadership ceases to feel like effort and begins to feel like orientation. You are no longer trying to dominate the inner world. You are learning to inhabit it with order. The battle does not end. The way you stand within it changes. And once this internal shift is felt, another step becomes necessary. Not just understanding this mindset, but learning how to live it deliberately. A framework must emerge, not as rules, but as movement of thought that guides action without rigidity. Understanding alone does not change the way you live. War did not teach people through ideas, but through necessity. The lessons that endured were not formulas. They were movements of thought practiced under pressure. Over time, these movements became instinct. This is how a mental framework is born, not as a list of rules, but as a way the mind learns to walk through uncertainty. In the experiences documented by Max Hastings, those who maintained inner balance did three things without naming them. They separated what depended on their action from what belonged to chance. They accepted what could not be altered without surrendering their sense of duty. And they acted with deliberation instead of impulse. These were not philosophical exercises. They were practical adaptations to reality. This same framework can shape everyday life when it becomes internal motion rather than external advice. You begin by distinguishing effort from outcome. You invest energy in conduct, not prediction. You stop measuring yourself by results you cannot command and start measuring yourself by choices you can defend. This removes a hidden source of suffering, the pain of expecting control where only influence exists. Acceptance follows naturally. Not as passivity, but as accuracy. You see clearly where resistance is useful and where it is wasteful. You no longer confuse endurance with defeat. You learn to stand inside limitation without shrinking. Fate becomes a boundary, not a verdict. Then reason takes its place again as guide. Emotions still arise, but they no longer monopolize interpretation. You listen to them without obeying them blindly. Thought regains its role as architect of action. The mind becomes less reactive and more intentional. This framework does not simplify life. It stabilizes it. Conflict still appears. Loss still arrives. Uncertainty still surrounds you. But these no longer define your inner climate. They become elements within it. You move through days with coherence instead of collapse. World War II did not produce saints. It produced human beings who learned to live inside danger without becoming danger to themselves. Their discipline was not heroic, it was sustainable, and that is the point. A living framework is one you can carry into ordinary mornings and difficult conversations. It does not demand perfection, it demands awareness. Once this way of thinking takes root, leadership no longer feels abstract. It becomes visible in small acts of restraint, in quiet decisions, in the refusal to let emotion rule interpretation, and this prepares the final movement of the journey. A recognition that leadership was never something waiting to be achieved. It was already being practiced each time you chose clarity over panic and responsibility over helplessness.